The infertile millionaire found a baby at his door and raised him. Years later, he needed surgery. What he discovered in the exam left the millionaire shocked. On a stormy autumn night, rain cascaded down the windows of Robert Albright's sprawling mansion. Thunder boomed, illuminating the meticulously trimmed hedges and the sleek cars lining his driveway. Inside, the millionaire sat alone, nursing a glass of scotch, lost in thought. The solitude of his enormous home mirrored the emptiness he carried inside. A sudden knock at the door broke through the sound of the storm. Startled, Robert hesitated, then rose to investigate. Peering out through the peephole, he saw nothing but darkness. Cautiously, he opened the door and was greeted by the sight of a small basket, shrouded in a blanket. Inside lay a baby, bundled against the cold, with bright, innocent eyes gazing up at him. Attached was a crumpled note with trembling handwriting. Asterisk, please give him a better life. I have no choice. Asterisk. Robert's breath caught. He glanced out into the rain, but saw no one. Little did he know, this moment would change his life forever, and what he'd uncover years later would leave him speechless. Robert stood frozen, the sound of rain mixing with the muffled coos of the baby. He felt an unfamiliar pang of confusion and compassion warring within him. His life had been meticulously controlled, every detail planned to perfection. A baby on his doorstep was not part of the script. Carrying the basket inside, he placed it gently on the sofa. The baby's delicate fingers reached out, as though searching for comfort. Robert ran a hand through his graying hair, his thoughts in turmoil. He had spent decades building his empire, compensating for the family he could never have. Infertility had robbed him of the one thing he had always yearned for, a legacy, a child to pass his world on to. Yet here he was, staring at a living, breathing possibility. Could this be the family I've always wanted? He murmured. His chest tightened as he realized how desperate he was for an answer to the emptiness he'd lived with for so long. The baby stirred, letting out a small cry that pierced the silence of the mansion. Robert scooped him up instinctively, cradling him against his chest. The warmth of the tiny body melted away his hesitation, and for the first time in years, a flicker of purpose sparked within him. I don't know where you came from, he whispered, looking into the child's wide, trusting eyes. But I won't turn you away. The note provided no clues, no name, no history, just a desperate plea. Robert made a call to his attorney to navigate the legalities, but in his heart, he'd already made the decision. This child would be his. That night, as the storm raged outside, Robert sat in the nursery he'd once prepared in the faint hope of starting a family. Dusting off the rocking chair, he held the baby close and murmured, I'll give you everything. You'll never want for anything. In that moment, Robert vowed to give this child the life he deserved, unaware of the extraordinary journey ahead. Robert's days of solitude vanished almost overnight. His once immaculate mansion now echoed with the sounds of baby giggles and the occasional wail of protest. The sharp, tailored suits he once wore to boardrooms were replaced by spit-up-stained sweaters as he learned the messy, chaotic joys of fatherhood. His staff, initially stunned by the sudden appearance of an infant, adapted quickly to the presence of the child he named Michael. Robert, however, insisted on doing much of the caregiving himself. Changing diapers, preparing bottles, and enduring sleepless nights were challenges he faced with determination and a sense of wonder. As months turned to years, Michael became the light of Robert's life. The baby's laughter filled the sprawling halls, and his wide-eyed curiosity brought a vibrancy that Robert hadn't felt in decades. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel like an empty shell. It felt like a home. The void Robert once carried was now filled with the bond he shared with his son, though he couldn't help but wonder about the mystery surrounding Michael's arrival. Michael grew into a lively and inquisitive toddler, his infectious energy transforming Robert's once silent home. Afternoons were spent chasing each other through the expansive gardens, where Michael's laughter blended with the chirping of birds. Evenings brought quiet moments, with Robert reading bedtime stories in a soothing tone that lulled Michael to sleep. Robert marveled at how naturally fatherhood came to him, despite his initial fears. He took pride in teaching Michael his first words and rejoiced when the boy's unsteady steps turned into confident strides. Their bond deepened with each milestone. Yet, as the years passed, subtle signs of concern began to surface. Michael was prone to frequent colds and seemed to tire easily after playing. Doctors reassured Robert that it was nothing unusual, but the nagging worry in the back of his mind persisted. Even with these minor worries, Robert's love for Michael only grew. He was determined to shield the boy from life's uncertainties, even as questions about Michael's origins lingered unanswered. As Michael reached the age of 5, his resemblance to neither Robert nor anyone in his family became increasingly noticeable. Curious acquaintances occasionally asked about Michael's mother, prompting Robert to craft a vague narrative about her absence. He hated lying, but the truth was as much a mystery to him as it was to others. Sometimes, when Michael was asleep, Robert would retrieve the note left with him that fateful night. The faint, hastily written words haunted him. Asterisk, please give him a better life. I have no choice. Asterisk, he would study the handwriting, hoping for a clue that could unlock the boy's past, but none ever emerged. Despite his curiosity, Robert chose not to dwell too much on the unknown. It doesn't matter where you came from, he whispered one evening, brushing Michael's hair back as he slept. What matters is where we're going together. And so, Robert focused on being the best father he could be, all the while wondering if the truth would eventually find its way to them. By the time Michael turned 15, he had grown into a sharp-witted, charismatic young man. His rebellious streak sometimes clashed with Robert's protective nature, but their bond remained strong. They shared a love of chess, sparring with strategic moves across the board while discussing everything from life goals to philosophy. Michael's intellect impressed Robert, but his growing independence worried him. Late-night outings, sharp retorts during arguments, and a hunger to explore the world beyond their estate occasionally left Robert frustrated. You don't understand what it's like to be trapped here, Michael had once shouted, his words stinging Robert more than he cared to admit. Yet, beneath the teenage defiance, Michael's love for his father was evident. He often sought Robert's advice on school projects or confided in him about his dreams of becoming a doctor. Despite the tension, the bond they had built over the years held strong, though neither could foresee the challenges that lay ahead. Michael's adventurous spirit began to wane when troubling symptoms disrupted his daily life. It started subtly, a growing fatigue that left him collapsing into bed right after school. Then came the sudden, unexplained bouts of pain in his chest and abdomen. Robert's concern grew as the symptoms worsened. One evening, after Michael fainted during dinner, Robert rushed him to the hospital. Hours later, a grim-faced doctor emerged with preliminary results. There's something concerning, the doctor said, his voice carefully measured. Michael's symptoms suggest a serious underlying condition. We need more tests to pinpoint the issue, but surgery might be required. Robert felt the floor shift beneath him. He had built an empire, solved impossible problems, and amassed unimaginable wealth, but none of that mattered now. His son, the boy who had brought meaning to his life, was at risk, and no amount of money could shield him from this battle. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits and medical consultations. Blood tests, imaging scans, and genetic analyses filled Michael's schedule, leaving him pale and exhausted. Finally, the diagnosis came. Michael had a rare condition requiring an immediate transplant of specific tissue from a compatible donor. Robert's heart sank as the doctor explained the gravity of the situation. Finding a perfect match is extremely rare unless the donor is a close biological relative, the doctor said. Robert nodded, though the words struck an odd chord. He wasn't related to Michael, at least not by blood. Still, Robert volunteered for compatibility testing. His thoughts raced. Asterisk, what if I'm not a match? What if we can't find one in time? Asterisk. The results came back sooner than expected. To everyone's astonishment, Robert was not just a match, he was a perfect one. The doctor's tone was incredulous. This level of compatibility is virtually unheard of, Mr. Albright. Are you sure you're not biologically related to Michael's? Robert's mind reeled. What was happening? How could this be possible? The revelation of Robert's perfect match sent ripples of confusion and disbelief through his carefully ordered life. He agreed to move forward with the necessary preparations, but questions lingered, gnawing at him. Sitting in the sterile hospital room while Michael slept, Robert mulled over every detail of their history together. Was there something he had missed? The note left with Michael had been so vague, offering no information about his origins. Yet now, the idea that fate, or perhaps something more deliberate, had brought Michael to his doorstep felt undeniable. The doctors, meanwhile, were equally puzzled. This kind of match usually only happens between a parent and child, one had said. Robert dismissed it outwardly, but inwardly, the comment struck a nerve. He couldn't ignore the possibility that Michael's arrival on his doorstep wasn't as random as it had seemed. For now, the urgency of Michael's health overshadowed the mystery. Robert signed the paperwork to proceed with the surgery, his love for his son outweighing every unanswered question. The news sent Robert into a whirlwind of memories. He sat alone in his study late at night, staring into the flickering light of the fireplace. The faint traces of Michael's resemblance to him now seemed glaring. Could it be possible? Robert's thoughts drifted to the past. He had spent years undergoing fertility treatments, each round more grueling and disheartening than the last. At one point, he and his then-wife had explored surrogacy, but that path had ended in heartbreak and divorce. The idea that someone could have gone through with one of their surrogacy plans without informing him felt far-fetched, but not impossible. He retrieved the note left with Michael. Turning it over in his hands, he noticed something he had missed before. Faint impressions on the paper, as if someone had pressed too hard when writing. For the first time, he considered hiring an investigator to uncover the truth. Still, there was no time for distractions now. Whatever the answers might be, Michael needed him. Despite the whirlwind of unanswered questions, Robert's priority was clear: saving Michael's life. He met with the surgeons to finalize the details of the procedure. "I don't care what it takes," he told them firmly. "Just make sure my son comes out of this alive." As the surgery date approached, Robert spent as much time as possible with Michael. They played chess, shared quiet conversations, and reminisced about their favorite memories. Michael, though weak, tried to hide his fear, but Robert could see it in his eyes. The night before the procedure, Robert sat by Michael's bedside, holding his hand. "I've got your back, kid," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not going through this alone." "I know, Dad," Michael replied softly, a faint smile on his lips. The bond between them felt unshakable. Whatever secrets the surgery might uncover, Robert resolved to face them head-on, driven by the love he felt for the boy who had brought meaning to his life. The day of the surgery arrived, heavy with tension. The hospital buzzed with quiet activity as nurses wheeled Michael into the operating room. Robert, dressed in a hospital gown, was prepped for the tissue extraction procedure that would save his son's life. Lying on the surgical table, Robert stared up at the bright lights, his mind racing. Though the doctors had reassured him of the safety of the procedure, he felt a gnawing fear. Not for himself, but for Michael. Hours passed. The precision and focus of the surgical team were evident through the glimpses Robert caught in his groggy state. Nurses moved swiftly between the two operating rooms, their faces masked but eyes resolute. When the procedures were complete, Robert awoke in a recovery room, groggy but filled with a burning need to know Michael's condition. A nurse entered, her face lighting up with a smile. "The transplant went well," she said. "Michael is stable." Relief washed over him, though the mystery of their connection lingered at the forefront of his mind. Later that evening, one of the surgeons entered Robert's room, a folder in his hand and a puzzled expression on his face. "Mr. Albright, may I speak with you privately?" he asked, closing the door behind him. Robert sat up, his heart pounding. "Is Michael okay?" "He's stable, recovering well," the surgeon reassured him. "But there's something unusual we need to discuss." He opened the folder and pointed to a report. "We ran additional tests to confirm the compatibility. What we found is extraordinary. The level of genetic alignment between you and Michael is conclusive." He isn't just a match. He's your biological son. Robert's breath caught. That's impossible, he said, shaking his head. I can't have children. I've been told that my entire life. The doctor's expression softened. I understand how shocking this must be. But the results don't lie. Michael is your son. The question is, how? Robert's world spun. The note, the unexplained arrival of Michael. Suddenly, it all pointed to a deeper truth. Someone had orchestrated this. But who?
And why?
The revelation left Robert reeling. Sitting alone in his hospital bed, he felt a storm of emotions. Awe, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of love for Michael. He clutched the crumpled note, his fingers trembling. Somewhere out there, someone had known the truth about Michael's origins and had chosen to bring him into Robert's life. Memories flooded back. The countless fertility treatments, the failed surrogacy attempts, and the bitter moments of letting go of his dream of fatherhood. Could one of those long-abandoned paths have led to Michael's birth? The thought filled him with equal parts hope and guilt. When he visited Michael in the recovery room, Robert's resolve crystallized. The boy's pale face and steady breathing reminded him of what truly mattered. As Michael stirred awake, Robert squeezed his hand. "You're going to be okay, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Michael smiled faintly. "I knew you wouldn't let me down, Dad." In that moment, Robert decided he would uncover the truth, not out of anger or curiosity, but because Michael deserved to know his story. The days following the surgery were a mixture of relief and quiet reflection. Michael's strength returned slowly, each day bringing more color to his cheeks and life to his eyes. Robert was by his side constantly, helping him with everything from adjusting his pillows to cheering him on as he took his first steps down the hospital corridor. "Dad, you're hovering," Michael teased one afternoon, a playful glint in his eye. "Guilty as charged," Robert admitted with a chuckle. "But you're stuck with me, kid." Despite the joy of seeing Michael recover, Robert wrestled with the weight of the revelation. Should he tell Michael the truth? How would it affect their relationship? He resolved to wait until Michael was fully healed before burdening him with the complexities of his origins. In quiet moments, Robert sat in the hospital's chapel, seeking clarity. The mystery of how Michael came to him loomed large, but one thing was certain. Their bond was unbreakable, no matter the circumstances. As Michael grew stronger, he and Robert began to slip back into their familiar rhythm. Chess games returned, now with Michael using his recovery as an excuse for losing. "You're taking it easy on me," he accused with a smirk. "Never," Robert shot back, moving his rook with calculated precision. One evening, as they sat on the hospital terrace overlooking the city, Michael grew uncharacteristically quiet. "Dad," he began hesitantly, "if something had happened to me during the surgery, I just want you to know I'm grateful for everything you've done. For being there. For being my dad." The words struck Robert deeply. He looked at Michael, his chest tightening with emotion. "Michael, I've never been more proud of anything in my life than being your father," he said, his voice steady but thick with feeling. Robert longed to tell Michael everything, the tests, the match, the truth about their connection, but he held back. For now, it was enough to cherish the love they shared. Late at night, after Michael had drifted to sleep, Robert found himself alone in the mansion study. The dim light of the desk lamp illuminated the worn edges of the note that had accompanied Michael on the night he arrived. Robert's mind turned over every detail of their journey together, each memory deepening his gratitude for the boy who had transformed his life. He thought about the sacrifices he'd made to be a father, the sleepless nights, the challenging decisions, and the rewards that came with them. Michael had brought him joy, purpose, and a love he hadn't believed himself capable of. But the unanswered questions about Michael's origins nagged at him. He considered reaching out to a private investigator, someone who could help untangle the threads of Michael's past. Yet part of him feared what he might find. What if the truth complicated their bond? In the quiet of the study, Robert made a silent vow. No matter what lay ahead, he would protect and cherish Michael with every fiber of his being. The boy wasn't just his son, he was his second chance at life. Weeks later, Michael had fully recovered and was back to his usual self, filling the mansion with his laughter and boundless energy. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Robert decided it was time to share the truth. He invited Michael to the garden, where the leaves had begun to turn golden, the air fragrant with the scent of fall. They sat on a bench beneath a towering oak tree, the sunlight dappling their faces. Robert took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "Michael, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've just learned myself." Michael's brow furrowed in curiosity. "What is it?" Robert explained the results of the compatibility tests, the doctor's revelation, and his own disbelief at the discovery. "Michael," he said softly, his voice trembling, "you're my biological son. I don't know how or why, but somehow, fate brought you back to me." Tears welled in Michael's eyes as he processed the revelation. Without hesitation, he leaned into Robert, wrapping his arms around him. "I don't care how it happened," he said, his voice steady with emotion. "You've always been my dad. That's all that matters." In that moment, Robert felt an indescribable sense of completeness. With the truth now out in the open, Robert and Michael found a renewed closeness in their relationship. They spent hours discussing what the revelation could mean, though neither dwelled on the past for long. For them, the present and the future mattered more than anything else. One day, as they walked through the garden, Michael paused by an empty patch of soil. "Let's plant something here," he suggested. "Something that'll grow with us." Together, they selected a young oak tree, a symbol of strength and endurance. As they dug the hole and set the roots, Robert marveled at how the act mirrored their journey, nurturing something fragile into a foundation of love and resilience. Michael took to calling the tree our legacy, a quiet reminder that family is not only built on shared blood, but also on shared effort and care. "Every time I see this tree," Michael said, patting the soil around its base, "I'll remember that we built something strong together." Robert nodded, his heart full. Years later, as the oak tree stood tall and strong, Robert often found himself sitting beneath its shade, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to that moment. The questions that had once haunted him, the mystery of Michael's origins and the improbability of their bond, no longer held the same weight. Instead, his focus remained on the life they had built together. He watched Michael grow into the compassionate and driven young man he had always dreamed of raising. True to his childhood aspirations, Michael had become a doctor, dedicating his life to helping others, inspired by the challenges he had overcome. One evening, as they sat together beneath the oak tree, Michael rested a hand on Robert's shoulder. "You know, Dad," he said, his voice soft, "I think fate had a plan for us all along." Robert smiled, the lines of age etched across his face, telling a story of love, sacrifice, and fulfillment. "Maybe it did," he replied. "But it's the choices we made that turned us into a family." As the sun dipped below the horizon, its golden rays filtering through the leaves of their tree, Robert felt at peace. He had found the greatest treasure of all, not in wealth, but in the unbreakable bond he shared with his son. Sometimes, the answers we seek come not from the past, but from the love we build in the present. Family is more than just blood. It's the choices we make every day. With that, the story of Robert and Michael ends, not with a mystery solved, but with a family united and a legacy of love firmly rooted, ready to stand the test of time.